Okay guys, so here's my new V35. And what I'm going to be doing to it today is wheel bearings. So, step one, acquire a new wheel bearing. Or what I got was a new hub and wheel bearing and got them pressed together. I'll show you that later. But first step is apply the handbrake, take the cotter pin out, remove the axle nut. Then you want to remove the caliper and undo the handbrake and get the rotor off. Then, next step, remove the 6 axle nuts that hold the axle to the diff there. Then you can pop the back of the axle down and slide it backwards to remove the axle out of the splines. Actually, you might not need to do that. You might be able to just slide the wheel bearing forward. I'll let you know when I get to that step. But yeah, remove the nut, remove the caliper, remove the rotor, and then I'll get back to you when I've done that. So, got a bit of a shower, but so once you've taken that cotter pin out and you've spun the nut out to about here, you wanna whack the end of the axle to knock it free of the splines on the wheel bearing or on the hub. But the reason you wind the nut out to here is so when you hit it, if you damage any of the end of the axle, well, you shouldn't really damage much because the nut's on there. But if you take the nut completely off and then you whack it, you'll mushroom the end of it and you won't be able to get the nut back on. So that went out real easy. Sometimes they can be a lot harder. And then you just wind the nut the rest of the way off, and you can proceed to taking the brake caliper off. I've done both sides at the same time because I didn't want to. You can't pull the rotor off the other side and then reapply the handbrake because it'll throw it all out of adjustment. Anyway, so now you've done that, you can remove the brake caliper, knock that off to the side, undo the handbrake, pull the rotor off. So once you got the rotor off and the caliper is just sitting there, you can see that, if you can hear it, that there's plenty of movement in these factory wheel bearings. So the reason you have to take the axle out is, once I get this nut off I'll show you. Is that to get to the bolts at the back. These ones in here. There. I don't know if you can see it, but there's 4 bolts in there. You can see the heads of them there. See, there's another one. There's one over there. Anyway, they're right in there and they're beside the CV of the axle. So you got to remove those bolts, the 6 bolts back there, and take the axle out, and then you're able to get access to the 4 bolts that hold the wheel bearing in. So I'll do that right now. Okay, so I've got the axle down. The problem is, it doesn't really want to fit through there. It hits the spring or it hits the fucking sway bar link bolt. I guess I could take the sway bar link out, but I don't really need to remove the axle any more than this, because now I've got access to the 4 bolts up there. So there's one there, there's one up there, one there, and the 4th one's there. So I can just sort of wiggle this around and get access to the bolts that I need. There's no point removing more than I have to. So yeah, I'll let you know when I've removed the wheel bearing out of the hub. I mean, unbolted it from the knuckle. Alrighty, so here's the old wheel bearing. Now, as you can see, there's a lot of rust in here, and if that gets built up too much, it can be a real cunt to remove. Now, another option is to press out the hub out of the wheel bearing and just buy the wheel bearing itself. and then you can, usually part of the wheel bearing will be left on the hub and you'll have to pull that off or cut it off, and then you can press this back into the new wheel bearing. If that's the case, you want to be very careful when you try and get this out that you don't damage the splines in there or the studs. In my case, I'm replacing both. So what I did was got a pry bar, whacked it, jammed it in the splines, smacked down on that, and it popped straight out. I couldn't actually get it out any other way. I tried hitting it from the back, I tried smacking here, I tried pushing it here on an angle, like in like that, to try and knock it free, and I couldn't. So my last resort was to put that in there. Now, if I was keeping the hub, that wouldn't be an option, because it would mess up the splines and then you wouldn't be able to get the axle back in. And this is the new wheel bearing I'll be using. Like I said, I bought both of these brand new and I just got them pressed together. And then yeah, I'm going to clean up in here, sand this up, and then place the new one in and get the bolts started. And then move on to the other side, and then you can reassemble everything. So then after doing that, you can reassemble, put the axle through and put the nut and the cotter pin on. Do the axle up as tight as you can with a breaker bar. It's starting to rain, so I'm going to go inside. But yeah, that's how to do wheel bearings on a V35 or 350Z. They're the same.